And we are now Wednesday afternoon live.
You are making the world a better place by listening to the Joy of Living podcast. This is your guide to achieving a more purposeful, powerful, and positive life. Join Barry Shore in unlocking the best version of you and becoming happier, healthier, and wealthier. And now, here's your ambassador of joy, Barry Shore.
Good day, beautiful, bountiful, beloved beings, and good-looking people. Remember, you're good-looking because you're always looking for and finding the good. We have good in abundance. 3 beautiful, bountiful, beloved, immortal beings here. They are so beautiful. I have no idea why I'm blessed to be with them, but I am. We have wonderful Dr. Diane Madved. We have fabulous Maura Sweeney and fabulous Lori McDermott and your humble host, Barry Shore. And, of course, this is the marriage webinar. And those people who are tuning in and have tuned in the past know that this is one of the most important shows in the entire world. And I'm not exaggerating, in the entire world about this remarkable institution called marriage. And I'm going to wax a little bit eloquent. Well, I hope it will be eloquent because I'm torn inside. I'm crying inside. I'm hurting inside about some of the issues we're going to be discussing today and maybe for subsequent weeks. And it goes to the very heart of the issue of why we began this remarkable process called the marriage webinar just a couple of years ago, and why so many thousands of people actually listen, send in questions, and are concerned when it comes to marriage and all the things, all the branches that come out of it, because marriage is the trunk of the tree. And the roots and all the branches that come off it are all the things that have to do with life, everyday life. Whether, in fact, you are in a marriage or not is beside the point, because marriage is the bedrock, the foundation of a functioning society. And I'm going to, I hope, be able to sum it up in a couple of words. At the moment, I am suffering from the edge of despair. I am not in despair. I am not depressed. It doesn't lend itself to my personality, and I work on it regularly. It's just not part of me. I will not give in to despair. And yet there is something happening in our country, the United States of America, that I liken to the kind of wildness and weirdness that happened in what I call the Salem witch trials. Now, I bring up the Salem witch trials because of several things. Number one, I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts. So Salem is not far from Boston. I went to Salem many times. I mean, it was a 25-minute drive, one with family, one with friends, etc. And the Salem witch trials are very famous throughout the world. Hello, the Salem witch trials? I mean, they actually killed witches? Yes, by dunking them in water. And I mean, just bizarre stuff. It happened over the course of about a year and a half, 1632 to 1633, something like that. And it was just a crazy time. There was a hysteria that took over an entire colony, which was Salem at the time. 200 people were accused of being witches, mostly female, some men as well. No men were killed, interestingly enough. But it originated with teenage girls. And I say that specifically because one of the things we're going to be discussing today has to do with something called gender dysphoria, which predominantly works with and is fostered by teenage girls, interesting enough. Teenage girls seem to be suffering more than almost anybody in the United States today as a result of the COVID lockdowns and the breakdowns, suicide rates, et cetera, et cetera. It's terrible. But as I say, I hearken back to the Salem witch trials, and I studied it in school because history is my passion in life. And the hysteria that surrounds things, whether it's negative in the case of the Salem witch trials or in quotation marks, positive in the sense of exuberance in a marketplace, whether it be called cryptocurrency or tulip mania, but that's hysteria. It takes over this human condition. The reason I mention it is because we're on a brink in the country of some hysterical situations which can lead people to despair. And I want to say that the opposite of despair is hope. Great four-letter word, hope, or hopefulness. You want to make a bigger word out of it. It's the antidote. And if you had to choose an institution, a group, or something that brings more hope to the world, I can't think of anything other than marriage. At least it's been that way in my life and in the lives of people I know. I'm happy and blessed to say that I know Diane and Michael for decades. I know Maura only through our situations here, but I sense who she is. And the same with Lori. I mean, I reached out to Lori after hearing her on Dennis Prager's program a few years ago, and right away, and we clicked immediately, right, Lori? And because of that natural exuberance of who she is, what she is, and such. So, to me, marriage is that unique situation, which should not be unique in the world, but is under siege today, which brings hope and battles despair, no matter how much it's raising its quite chimeric, ugly head. And, like the Hydra, mythology, as you cut one head off, another one grows back. So that's the nature of despair. But hope will prevail. And I say that as an introduction because the questions that we're about to be discussing, certainly we couldn't have said we wouldn't be discussing them 5 years ago. That's for sure, as Maura said. Not only that, the fact that people are writing in these questions and talking about themselves, their family, their loved ones, shows that there's something happening out there that is strange at best. I think that's the only word I could use. And one of the things that I love most personally about the fact that you wonderful women are dedicating some time to this and to be helping other people is that you recognize that what we're doing here does make a difference. It's important to a lot of people. They want to hear our input, not so much just to say, oh, gee, everything's going to be okay. On the contrary, it may not be, but we want to give input from people who have great insight into things. I mean, Diane is not just a mother and grandmother and an author and a podcaster and a great wife and friend and such. And as is Maura and Lori, not grandmothers yet, but the ability to bring to bear tremendous insights from life experiences that are quite deep. That's really helpful to many, many people right now. So as I said, I have lots of questions here, hundreds more than we've ever had before. I will just tell you several of them, and then we're going to go to one right away. But they have to do with what people call the breakdown of gender. I call that a BOG, breakdown of gender. It happens to be also something called gender fluidity. I mean, I'm learning things, by the way. I know this stuff because I hear it and I'm reading about it, but people are writing in about what's happening with them. Gender fluidity, non-binary as a situation, and something called queer all school or queer all day, something called ROGD. You familiar with this? Rapid onset gender dysphoria. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm going to read you the questions. School districts that are instructing children in what they called ideation gender. I never heard of these things. And ideation gender. And here where it gets worse. Again, questions, not telling parents. Okay, we're going to go to that. Some school districts which are involved with something called parental re-education for those who are non-supportive. What else did I want to see? Oh, yes. Then we'll go to the simple one about giving vaccines for kids under the age of 5. Ah! Okay. I don't know where to begin, but I'm going to begin with one that at least 100 questions that were in this particular area. And of course, we're going to lead off with wonderful Diane, as we do, as is our wont. I hope I can even formulate the question, Diane and Maura and Laurie, so it becomes clear and cogent, but it has to do with something called gender fluidity. So either you're familiar with it or you're not, it doesn't matter, because you can comment. I'm sure, just the two words by themselves give us insight into what the people are asking, but parents are asking, what do I even begin to do with things that my kids are being taught at school? This is where it gets really important. Kids are being taught at school about gender fluidity. Those are the words that kids are bringing home. And I can't even tell you how many questions, but there were at least 24 where the kids were under the age of 7. I mean, think about it. At 7 years old, I don't think I knew what a pimple was, let alone anything else in your body. Gender fluidity. So I don't even know how to begin a question, Diane, but I'll start with, how do we speak to people who are listening, who care and want to know from us what it is that is happening with, mostly in public schools, I think maybe even in some private schools, where kids, I don't know up to what age, let's call it 13, 15, 16 maybe, are being taught about gender fluidity. Is that a fair question? Do you hear the question?
I'm not clear on the question.
Okay, let me try and rephrase a question. I'm a parent, or we're parents. What do I do with the fact that a school that I send my kids to, or kid, is teaching about gender fluidity? What do I do?
First of all, we have to realize that people have always been different. People's personalities and the amount that they show or identify with the typical trappings of their gender has always been fluid in a way. I mean, there are tomboys, we accepted them for who they were. And there are girls who like to wear princess outfits, which is the vast, vast majority of girls. And we love them and accept them for who they are. Then there are those sort of in between. I didn't care for dolls when I was a kid, but I definitely didn't have any question that I was a girl, and enjoyed a lot of other girl type things that were stereotypical. I think that what we're doing here is an overboard on political correctness, that the truth of the matter is most everyone, except for maybe 1% or part of 1%, is secure in their gender. And most people, I mean, again, 99.8% would not have questioned it or said anything about it or had anything to do with it, were it not for the political correctness and power of a certain fringe minority in our culture, and the kindly liberals who want to be accepting and loving of everyone for who they are, who have embraced a lot of these terms and made them flow beyond their natural boundaries into the common culture, and thereby have influenced teachers and curricula and many people who are in a position to then tell our kids, gee, there's such thing as gender fluidity. I think the bottom line of it is that what we have to do with our kids is let them know we love them for who they are, and that our viewpoints tell us that there's boys and there's girls, and that boys can have different interests and girls can have overlapping or diverging interests, and that it's all acceptable, and basically laugh off in a way, if possible, depending on your situation, who's saying what, all this extraneous stuff. Just make your kids feel secure that in your family, you appreciate them for who they are, and that they're a boy or they're a girl. And that's how they have been born and how you view them, that boys have certain equipment and girls have different equipment, and that as they grow up, they will be accepted and loved for who they are. And I think that we have to minimize by our own discussion and behavior that gender fluidity means anything. The more upset we get about it, the more our kids see us get upset about it, the more they pick up that upsettedness and then think, gee, this is important. Gee, this is something I either have to, fight with my mom on, or I have to say something to my teacher. Then the kids get put in the middle. I think we have to be very careful to make sure each of our own kids is accepted and loved, and that we don't put them in the middle, that we make sure that they make as light of the fact that there's a few fringe people who on the edges are exerting their power as we can make it. In other words, don't take it that seriously. There's plenty of studies that show that even kids who have gay experiences when they're in that impressionable age group of late teens, early 20s, by 30, they have become secure in their original sexuality. There's always going to be a time of experimentation and questioning. That's normal, that's accepted. And if we let our kids know that's normal and accepted, but that really, then we have to tell them 99.9% of people end up identifying with their own genders and choosing to just be comfortable in who they are. And we need to re-emphasize with our kids that our theme in our family is respect for each individual for who he or she may be. And if they want to use a different pronoun, we can accept that they want to use that different pronoun and that they may be temporary, that they may choose to change their pronoun at a different time, and that we want to go by correct grammar while at the same time respecting what other people choose. So I know that can be a delicate balance to call somebody they when you know that grammatically it's really wrong. I have trouble with that myself. I'm sure I would get in trouble for misusing wrong pronouns. But at the same time, we need to set rules, boundaries, and values for our own families and our own kids, and make the kids aware that this is really only a problem for a small amount of people. It's not a problem that affects most everybody, the vast majority of people. And I think it's wonderful when little girls choose to wear tulle tutus, because that's expressing themselves. And if they choose to wear something else, that's fine too. We just need to let them all know that they're loved.
I think I should have brought the picture that my mother took of me and 6 years old wearing a tutu. You'd all be very happy to see that. I was just so hip then. First of all, thank you so much. You brought to bear a number of pieces here. I don't want to unpack in the moment because I want to hear from Maura and Lori. But there were two things here I just want to make very clear, and it's good that you brought it out. We're talking about a minority of a minority of minority. And even though I'm inundated with just hundreds and hundreds of questions, because people they never thought of it before. But it is a tiny, tiny minority. Okay, very important. Number two, I will tell you that for good or ill, a lot of questions, which we'll have like bring up later, the whole point here is that it is not binary anymore. There is not. That's what people are being taught in school. It's not binary, but let's not go there at the moment. That's another question. And that, I think, is what's the difficulty that a lot of people are I've had this word probably 220 times. I'd lost count after 200. Confusion. That's really what's being sown here is confusion. And that's, I think, unhealthy, not just for kids, or I mean, adults as well, but it's hard to learn anything when you're confused. You know, it's tough enough trying to get people to learn 2 + 2 is 4 when you're 28 years old, let alone, what gender you are. But so thank you. I think it's really important. Pronouns, we won't go, that's a whole other question. But you really got something very important here about grounding in our family. This is a key. In our family with our values, and keep emphasizing that love and that that really, that stability as against the confusion that could otherwise happen. Thank you. Very nice. Maura, what do you think about when you hear that kids are being taught about gender fluidity, which I couldn't even spell fluidity until I was probably 18?
And we didn't even know such a concept existed about ourselves, did we?
I didn't.
Male and female, and then we were maybe gay or something, and now we're fluid. And that means something else another day.
What it means is that you're pancake batter.
I can take it even a further step, because I'm sure some of you have seen there's now a group of individuals out there, again, social media, but it all bleeds out into society, that refer to themselves as furries. Have you heard that?
What is it, furry?
F-U-R.
Oh, yes, animals.
Felines, other kinds of animals. Now, Diane, I love the fact that you always take the question first, because you do a good job of trying to bring in where we're going. Let me say a few things. This idea about sexual orientation, we all grew up, I mean, we have a sexual world in that we had men and women, boys and girls. The issue of sexuality has been growing and growing. And I mean growing in a very specific way. We are all people. We all coexisted in society, but we were not fully designed to think about ourselves only in regard to what our sexuality was. The transition that's taken place is that there started to be more of a focus on it, of this sexual reorientation, let's say. And then after the focus, there became an emphasis on it. And Barry, you mentioned in your monologue at the beginning, the emphasis is almost moving to the place of hysteria now, as if somehow, for some reason, the biggest issue we have in America, or one of the biggest issues, is what our sexual orientation is. That goes to our identity as individuals that interact with others, and finally, as a society. If all we're thinking about is what our sexuality is, or is not, or might be tomorrow, then we have, in a sense, thrown away so much of everything else we are. I like what Diane had referenced, and I totally agree. I want to say something. It's probably close to 20 years ago, we moved to our current home. Across the street was a couple, two gay men. And one was out, he was connected with the military. The other one was more domestic. And I remember him saying to me, he was a young man, and he was very much aware, or in his own mind, I want to say, that other people in the neighborhood didn't like him, didn't accept him. And I remember saying to him one day, I said, when you look at yourself in the mirror, or you think others are looking at you, do you think the only thing they're aware of is your sexuality? I said, you're a full person. Why do you focus in on this? But I want to bring it a step further. And again, we're talking to parents. When we are only focused in on one aspect of who we are, and that one aspect is uncertain, or let's say has a huge question mark on it, because after all, we might have been born one way, but maybe we feel like we're something else, and tomorrow we may be something else because we're gender fluid. We now have a major identity crisis going on. And someone, only about a week ago, because I talk to such a vast array of people all the time. And I don't know whether I make it my business to do this, but someone made a very interesting remark recently. They said, if people can get, and take this down to children, if they can get to the point to question what gender they are, now we have a group of people who question their very own identity. And if you could get that far into an individual's doubt of their own identity, now they are very weakened in every other aspect of their life. So I would say on a positive note, absolutely, we love children, we love each other, we respect one another, but we don't look at them necessarily through their gender. They are a whole person. So therefore, let's say from an empowerment standpoint, because we do know there are certain forces that want to make this a major issue, we can be a counterforce. We can be a counterforce that doesn't focus in on sexuality. We could talk more about people's other qualities, their skills, their abilities, how much we like them, the good sense of humor that they have, the good job they do at work, the wonderful schoolwork that they put together, the great artwork they put together. So we become a counterforce in a sense to say life, without even having to say it sometimes, life is a lot more than discussing and thinking about and questioning your own sexual identity. So that would be one thing. The other thing, just these are a few observations I made. This is a huge thing here in the United States. I would also say it's the same would be true in Western Europe, Canada, Australia, New Zealand area. But you go to many other countries in Eastern Europe, Southeastern Europe, you go to Russia, many other countries, gender issues do not enter into the equation. So that has always told me, and we know we've always had a certain members of the population that are, gay, whatever. But there is something when you notice the differences that take place over a period of time in certain countries where entire populations shift their way of thinking, that this is not necessarily a natural phenomena. At some level, it is, can I say, I don't want to say staged, manipulated, formed into the public consciousness. So I would say we can be a counterforce to it. Secondly, I would say celebrate who and what you are. Be a good model for being a good person, comfortable in your own skin, let's say as a parent. Now, I'm a mother. I'm a woman. I do a lot of different things, but I'm happy being a woman. My husband, happy being a man. He's probably got more sentiments than most women do, but he's happy being a man. And I think this goes to what Diane said. There have always been differences within us, but to make it more about that rather than focusing in or making a major issue about one's continuously questionable sexuality. So that's all I have, which is probably more than I intended to say.
It is, and I'm glad you did. I like the words counterforce. The example you gave about a particular homosexual fellow who his impression was that people were looking at him as, oh, he's the homosexual, as opposed to, hey, that's Gary, what a nice guy. He lent me his lawnmower or something. But again, the other issue is that we're dealing now with kids. You see, you're still talking as an adult, Maura. The people that are writing in are talking about their kids but you said it very nicely, the identity crisis. And it weakens people a bit because I can't hear you. Can you speak for a moment? Oh, there you go. Okay. I just want to make sure you listen. Okay. But this weakens people and it weakens the country, in my humble opinion. I mean, I'm concerned about the country and our next generations, because there's an attack that's happening. Now, I want to use two words, and I think Lori's going to break out laughing when I say these. Yes, and wonderful, Lori. By the way, this is an aside, inside baseball stuff. Diane, I don't think you know this, and Laura, I don't think you know this because I didn't know this until a week or so ago. Lori was involved with Second City Improv in Chicago for almost 2 decades. So cool. She's the ringer in the group here. She knows more than any of us. Okay. Yes, and so wonderful, Lori.
Yes, and is a trick. It's an improv trick that is used to keep dialogue continuing. So if you're having a conversation with someone and they're saying something you don't agree, instead of going, no, I don't believe that, you go, yes, and you switch it back to what you want to talk about. So that's the reference there. So this is a big thing for me because, as you all know, I'm very confident. And if I, as an adult who is extremely confident, can be swayed and influenced on things I don't understand or I'm curious about, like I had a friend who had vagina surgery and I was like, why? And she said, because it's hanging. I'm like, how do you know? And I was concerned, like, do I need vagina surgery? Like, do I need people to check? I didn't know that was a thing. So I'm an adult and I'm really confident. But if I was 14 or 13 or 9 or 10 And I don't even know who I am yet. And let's say my parents are getting divorced and I'm worried about all of that. And let's say there's a group of kids at school that I don't know very well and they're being weird to me. Now I'm worried about that. And then I've got siblings who are kind of driving me crazy and I'm worried about that. And then apparently I'm supposed to figure out what college I'm going to go to, what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life. And I'm worried about that. And then someone says, oh, you could have gender fluidity. What? Oh my gosh. Maybe I'm supposed to be a boy. Maybe I'm supposed to be a girl. How do I know? My friends say this. My friends say this. It's just one more layer we're putting onto these kids who just want to grow up. And I deal with human beings who are having midlife crises because when they were teenagers, their parents were having divorce or there was some type of trauma and they never solved it. And this is just one layer of more trauma that leads back to, who am I? What is my purpose? And I feel these teachers that stand in front of their classrooms and just repeat stuff they're getting from the higher ups are not doing our children justice. They have to be the people that hear from the higher ups and go, huh? You want me to say what? I think that might confuse my kids. And then don't say it. I wish we had strong teachers. These teachers who go through all these motions of becoming teachers, they are communicating to our children. And we have given them the torch to do such a thing. This is such a huge responsibility that nobody questions these teachers. Like, you know, when that first homeroom visit's coming in September, you sit down with your teacher, what's the curriculum? Can a parent raise their hand and go, so how are we talking about sex and genuine, you know, about the fluidity or whatever topics are verbs that they use these days, and have a dialogue with that teacher. What are you going to do when they start talking about these topics? You have to say them. How are you going to teach our kids? Are you going to? I would prefer not. Anyone else in the room doesn't want to? Okay, let's not. I don't have kids in younger grades right now, but let me tell you, if I did, I am that mother to speak up. I've been banned from going to some sports because of this, but it's another story. But I am someone who speaks up. And if you don't want me to speak up, don't invite me, because I'm going to tell you when I think things are hurting our children, and they are hurting our children. Everyone's like, oh, the suicide rate's up. Of course it is. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about this. Now I'm worried about this. Now I don't know what sex I am. I cannot imagine living a life with all the other stuff I had to worry about as a teenager, and then throw in, I don't know what sex I am. It's terrifying. And for kids today to wonder, well, maybe I'm a boy, maybe I'm a girl. My kids have shown me videos of people saying that on YouTube. They don't know what they are. How terrifying. Anyway, that's my piece.
I want to emphasize something here. I could have brought it up before I didn't, and you did. There were at least 50 references. Again, I had hundreds and hundreds of questions. At least 50 references to the word terrified. That was the word that parents were using. I don't know if these are single parents, two-parent household, it didn't matter. People writing in, and they're saying, my kid or my kids are terrified. And I'll tell you, there were three only, but three was, I thought, interesting, that referenced the end of the world through climate change. Yes, my kids are terrified that the world is going to end before they're going to be 21. I mean, that was an exact quote. Terrified. Now, where did they get that? They didn't get it in their home. Like Diane said, in the home, that's not what they're talking about. So maybe gone from their peers, but most likely in a school setting. But the word terrified came up 50 different times, because I can tell you, I don't think I could be a kid today in school. You know, I went to public school. I don't know if I could be a 9-year-old boy in a public school today. Pronoun? What are you talking about? I mean, it's all, I laugh, but I don't laugh at them. I laugh because I'm crying, because I don't understand. Okay, you can say, well, you're just an older man, Mr. Shaw. Of course you don't understand. Well, no, I don't understand because it doesn't make logical, it's not common sense. Part of what you're saying here. We all know that I love to play with words, right? So I've been looking at this and using this actually now for about 5 years. ever since I came in contact with a teacher who was was a radical 5 years ago in this area of gender stuff. And I told him, interestingly enough, that he did something, what I call, he inverted his role as a teacher. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, same letter as teacher spells the word cheater. If you're not teaching correctly and helping and encouraging and creating and shaping and forming kids for young adulthood, then you're cheating. You're a cheater. That's what you are. It's too easy if you're not a teacher to be a cheater. And part of the issue is that there are people, there's a wonderful fellow who I love to read, his name is Eric Hoffer. Eric Hoffer was, in my humble opinion, the greatest American philosopher, certainly of the past 100 years. And he wrote about a couple of essays called True Believers. One of the things that's happening in schools today, and again, we're going to get to a question right after this, is that there's an entire group, a cadre, I'll call them, because that's what the communists used to call their young recruits, the cadre, of true believers who don't see anything that we're talking about as untoward or incorrect. Matter of fact, this is what we need to be teaching our kids. That it is non-binary. No, Diane, there is no boy and girl. That's the white patriarchy. Get with the program. By the way, it's also called, and I read this in an LAUSD circular. Then I'm calling it an attack, but in the circular, there were 3 paragraphs talking about how Black families are really prone to, in quotation marks, the white patriarchal system. You got to love this stuff because they adhere to male-female situations. They hold by old teachings. You hear this stuff? This is LAUSD. The second largest, what do they call that? Educational department in the country. New York is number 1. LA, by the way, number 3 is Henderson, Nevada. Henderson, Nevada, number 3, 321,000 kids. It's a huge county. The reason I mention it is because I said, if you're not a teacher, you're a cheater. And what we're discussing today is what is the hope that we're bringing to young, potentially very confused people, because kids are people. And it's too easy. You said it beautifully, Lori. I mean, my parents are getting divorced. Okay, that can happen. We've discussed this many times over the past couple of years. That's enough to sort of bring trauma. But I don't know who I am. Okay, well, that's sort of not unusual in life. But in my what is that about? Is that me on feedback? Okay. But the issue at hand is confusion for young people leading to suicide. I mean, we can read in the paper or wherever we read, nobody reads the paper anymore. When we read on whatever our social feed is, that teenage suicide has increased dramatically. Nobody knows the exact number, but it's not up 3%. It's up a double-digit factor. That's number 1. Number 2, mostly in teenage girls. It's in Lori's house. Good. It's teenage girls are more susceptible to these issues being taken internally and causing distress and confusion. And I want to go now to this. I saw the querulous look on your face, the wonderful Diane, when I mentioned the ROGD. I mean, I'm laughing only because I'm crying, to keep from crying. So I'm just going to bring it up as a statement and then a question. We're getting close to our hour. Wow. ROGD stands for, I have to write it down and remember it, Rapid Onset Gender Dysphoria. And
what is that?
Okay, well, here's what it is. Apparently it takes place in teenage girls or under teen, let's say 11 even, sometimes as low as 10 years old, but 10 to 14, 10 to 15. They don't know who they are. generally speaking, certainly many more girls than boys, but it's girls thinking, I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, and going in for hormone blockers and breast removal. And where it gets really weird is that the school system, not the school system because it's just too much in the United States, but many school districts are being urged not to share information with parents, and you do not need parental consent for a doctor or a school clinician to advise, not to advise against, to advise, yes, well, we'll give you hormone blockers if you think that you're a boy, and we'll help you. So again, I don't know how to even phrase the question, Diane, but how does it strike you, this whole process of gender dysphoria? I call it gender dysphoria, obviously, and it's in the literature as that at the moment, but that a rash of young girls, or not even girls, female kids, thinking that they're boys and trying to do something to their bodies to prevent the process of them growing. And parents are writing in saying, I'm terrified for my kid.
I mean, it's obscene that a little girl would receive hormone blockers and have, such as it is, breast removal or altering of her physiology based on something that she says she feels at that time. If we don't allow children to decide if they can smoke or drink or make other decisions, why do we decide that they know about what their future gender is about? At that age, children should have a carefree, innocent childhood, as I wrote with my husband in this book, Saving Childhood. And I think that all of this talk is causing the problem that there are not more little girls or little boys who are gender dysphoric, although gender dysphoria is a real disorder. It is a problem, and it has occurred to people, and it has been addressed by psychology and regular medical doctors as well over the years. That doesn't belittle it as a problem, but we have to see it as not normal. We have to see it as an abrogation of parental and educational duty if we take that, what a child says, seriously. And children may ultimately make their own decisions once they become adults, but as children, they're under our guardianship, and we are to protect them from malign influences. And I think that what the best way to do that is for parents is to be close to your children. In other words, talk to your children all the time. Talk to them every day. Talk about what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And if they hear something that is wrong in terms of your values or your beliefs, then you need to say that, and you need to say it immediately. Well, I don't hold this because, and give a reason that is logical, that makes sense to the child, not over the child's head, not physiology that the child doesn't need to know, or anything that the child doesn't need to know, but just firmly state your values. But the key is to be in contact with your child every day. Talk to your child. Ask what's going on in school. Ask what they'd like to do and what they wouldn't like to do. Ask their favorite this and their favorite that, and their least favorite this and that. Get to know your child so well so that you are the authority on your own child. Don't let the school take over. Don't let even the doctor take over. What you have to do is parent your child. And that means love them and be close to them and understand them and respect them, but not beyond their years. Remember, they're only children, and they should have a time of life that is carefree, that is innocent, that is able not to deal with these topics. And if you have to go to school and be your child's advocate for that, do it in such a way that is not threatening to the teacher. The key is educators are really dedicated people, and I honor and respect them. And I don't think there's a single educator there who's teaching this stuff who isn't worthy of respect and putting on your team. Go to the teacher and say, I'd like to work with you on something that's causing emotional problems for my child. I need to talk to you as the co-parent, in a way, the person who is fostering my child's future. And we seem to have some confusion. We have some disagreement, perhaps, or maybe not. But we are working together. We are a team to make this child grow up to be self-confident and capable and able to face the world. We're working together, and I need to work with you on it if you find a problem. And if you see that your teacher, by the way, is doing something positive, please express to that teacher how much you appreciate it. Because if you just come with complaints, then the teacher's already going to feel against you. She or he won't be your friend if you've always only been complaining. You need to be supportive of all the good things, as well as just factual, just caring about anything about which you have doubts or questions, and come with the attitude that I have a question. I am not sure what to make of this. I'm confused. I have a problem with certain ideas, and I'm not sure if my child's heard them or not, and what's going on. Can you set me straight? And ask the teacher then to voluntarily be on your team and work with you so that your child is not confused and not distressed. And keep in mind with the teacher and with the child too, when you talk to the child, my goal is for you to have peace. My goal is for you to be calm and happy every day and wake up and be appreciative of our world and our family. Every day should be happy for you. Let's try and work together so that every day we wake up, if you're Jewish, and say, Modeh ani lefanecha. Thank you, God, for giving me another day. And I think that that's the key, is that if you can promote a positive, happy environment where you talk to your child and your child feels that he or she can come to you at any time with anything. You can just offhandedly make a comment, can say anything no matter what you're doing, and you don't give a dirty look like they're interrupting. If that child and you have a bond, then you'll be able to combat anything that is counter to your values together with your child, with your child's teacher, with the many people in the environment and community. And don't forget your church or your rabbi, people who share your values. Make sure that your children associate with others who share those values. For example, I put my kids in Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and at that time, at least, it was consonant with my values, and it was a way I could be involved in something that imparted values that I really value. So those are the kinds of organizations. If you have something that's more in line with your thinking, get your child involved. Make sure that there's a support network that shares your values. So that would be it. Respect your child, talk to your child, know your child, and work in concert with your teachers and with the others in your environment, and set up the environment to be the kind of place you want your child to grow up and associate.
So this is wonderful. There are a couple of things I want to unpack here. One of is, as you said, be close to your kid or kids. Speak with him, her, them, they, whoever they are, every single day. By the way, it's important. Every day. It's not like, twice a week. Well, we speak on Mondays and Wednesdays. Every day is a day to speak, because that's who you are. That's who they are. They're part and parcel of you. And that they understand the shared values. I want to go back to what you began with, is that it is not normal for 7 to 14-year-old girls to make a decision either by themselves or because their friends did. I'm a boy. And then to want to act upon that in such a way to create a really difficult situation. Going to teachers and showing appreciation, demonstrating appreciation every day, whenever, just because you create a bridge that way, so that when you do need to go to them with some particular issue, that you're not walking in as the complainer, but as the appreciator. Oh, here comes Diane. Okay, now what can we talk about? Well, it happens to be da-da-da. part of what you did say here, and I'm saying that with respect, comes out as a Leave It to Beaver situation. It's, hey, this is great. Yeah, that's all well and good, but we live in the real world. That's not how kids are today, or things like that. There's a lot of stuff happening, a lot of it because of social media. Let's be blunt. Not to point a finger at social media, because social media is just an extension of who we are. So if you're letting it in your home and it takes over your house, well, then shame on us, right? But social media is a force to be reckoned with. It's a tsunami of its own, and it's generally not filled with joy, happiness, peace, and love unless you're tuning into the Barry Short channel. Otherwise, there's a few other channels out there that are just not me. But it's very important what you said here, Diane. Thank you. So Laura, let's go to this issue of rapid onset gender dysphoria. Can you imagine your daughter coming home from school at the age of 8? No, forget even coming home from school. She came home from school. She didn't tell you that the school is urging her to have hormone blockers. And then you found out. Wow.
I'd be a little bit upset, Barry, to say the least. So let me step back from this just a moment. We are here because this is a marriage webinar. It's the marriage, it's the family, it's the children, and it's the unit that we create. And there's no doubt that this dysphoria, or rapid onset gender dysphoria, is a thing that's out there right now. And it's also very actively moving throughout many school systems. I would say all of them. There are a couple of things that struck me as Diane was speaking. Number one, absolutely, because we are parents, our goal is to know and love and nurture and help develop our children so that when they grow up, they feel like confident and competent adults. And how does that happen? But it happens through love. It happens through the right kinds of reinforcements. It comes through the right kinds of, let's say, even boundaries at various ages. And it was always the case. That's right. Parents would decide you're in at a certain time. You can do this till a certain moment. When you get older, you can do that. And yet here we have a completely new arena where a young child might be invited or coaxed or otherwise kind of brought into a system where they're questioning who they are, and then they're now invited into hormone blockers. I would say as a parent, and this is the way I've always been, all of my approaches, I'm always kind, and I will always come to someone as if I am their advocate. In this case, the teacher. It could be a teacher. It could be a school system. My assumption is that teacher and that school system is there for the benefit of my child to learn, to grow, and also to be a support. If it turns out, and this is the case in some cases, I've spoken with many teachers here in Florida and elsewhere. So many of them take on teaching as if it is a calling in life, almost like it's their mission. They have it within them, and they are so good-natured, and their desire to do well is there. There are many among them who have gotten very discouraged over the past decade or so because they said so little of their work is about education, and so more of it is about political correctness and inserting all of these additional things in. So I would say as a parent, number one, absolutely, to stay close to the children, to encourage your own to be a parent, not to be the kind of parent that keeps certain topics off limits and makes children intimidated of bringing subjects to you. Because this is what I've heard from certain teachers that feel that parents don't understand. So be that open parent. But on the other hand, I will say this, and without any question, if I found out that I had a growing child in school and that there were elements within the school system encouraging my child to question their identity and change their sexuality at a very young age, as a parent, I would have a major problem with that, and I would continue to escalate it. And I think that's also where we can use our own influence, our own voice, and our own level of protection for our children. To a child, I would say, if this is something you feel right now, it's perfectly possible you could be feeling this way. I'll affirm you in it. But I will also tell you that the decisions you're looking to make are life changing. If this is something you're thinking about, you can continue thinking about it for a number of years until you are of an age and at a place where you recognize that these decisions are irreversible and you are not at that place right now. And as your parent, it's my job to make sure that I protect you until you grow to a certain place. And you set up those boundaries. And I want to say one further thing. Might be slightly off topic. There is an issue at work right now, and I've heard it from several educators. And again, it's only some, that the child is more a ward of the state than the member of someone's family. And the reason why this strikes me very close to home is that I remember several years ago, we had, it was a number of years ago, we had one exchange student who came from Russia. And she had told Nick that when she was going through school, this was during the time of communism, that the schools were actually recruiting the children into, I think it was the Young Pioneer group. And what they were teaching, and I would say indoctrinating into these children, is that you come first with a responsibility and an answerability to the state and not to your parents. It's stuff with sexuality or critical race theory or some of these other issues that we're talking about right now start to weave their way in. And what they end up doing is putting a wedge between children and their parents and their values. And therefore the values within our country, because they're breaking it down and breaking the families. And at that point, I would say as a parent to get more involved and more vocal, maybe run for the local school districts, which I do know a lot of people doing that here in Florida. But we can either be so kind and so nice and so quiet at certain elements that wish to make this more of an issue and more of a hysteria, end up being able to do it because of our own silence and a default. So I think it's something that we could take as a progressive. But definitely I would say be close to your children and also let your child know that during certain parts of their lives, you're going to be taking a lead until such time they are ready to do so themselves. And I think a child that recognizes the confidence and the love in a parent, they buck a little bit, but I think at some other level, they'd be somewhat more, I would say, I think they'd feel safer in that kind of an environment.
This is very important. It echoes part of what Diane was mentioning also, is that it is vital to make sure that you have relationship, discussion, talking with kids, even though kids can say, oh, come on, Ma, come on, Dad, after a while. It doesn't matter. You want to talk to them because the alternative is what you just said, wonderful Maura. Yes, you gave an example of what it was like in communist Russia. First of all, do not think it's any different than today in Russia, even though it hasn't become communist. And it is that's the essence of communism. It was also that way on a kibbutz, which were very communist. The point of it is that the child or children are seen as wards of the state. That is, they are there to serve the state, and that the family is a secondary issue. America is a very different place in the world. We are unique. We are individuals. We are family unit. We're family oriented, yes, with shared values and community, but it's a community of families. It's families that do things. And it is just so important what you just said. We need to be cognizant of it at all times, that how should we say, that it's not that far from being sending a child to a school where you don't know what's going on, and then finding out a few years later that they've been indoctrinated with things that are shocking to you because we weren't involved. We weren't enough caring and such. Lori, let's talk with you for a few minutes about this rapid onset gender dysphoria. And Laura made a very interesting point, and I don't want to go into it because it's a little too close to home, because I know you mentioned a friend of yours. When one is an adult and chooses something like transgender and such like that, that's a very different type of situation than a 7-year-old or a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old girl going through things. You know, the fact that a kid of that age group could even be influenced for the kinds of things that are happening now, where literally hormone blockers, breast removal. I mean, it's hard for me to say the words because it makes me cry, but it's happening in your backyard. In other words, at the school in Manhattan Beach area, there are doctrines that are being put forth to kids. Thank God your kids are older now. But if they had been still back in grade school, you'd be hearing about this. And the only way sometimes to fight it is to, yes, be very supportive of our kids, but also at some point maybe even having to remove kids from the school system. Because what are you going to do? You can't leave them there. It's a toxic environment. So what do you think about the idea that rapid onset gender dysphoria is happening specifically amongst young kids, female 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds, and parents are not being informed?
I just think that's horrific. I cannot imagine being a parent and finding out the school was helping my child change sex. That I'm guessing 20, 30 years from now, when certain children decided later that they were abused in school to take these drugs or these enhancing pills, that they might sue the school years from now. We'll find out. But in my experience, I have a very good friend whose daughter became her son. It was really hard on her, but she was right there all along because the child was very secluded and didn't want to be part of the family for a long time until she came clean and said, this is what I want. And it took a few years to go through that. And then her mom was the advocate to get her to change. But she was 18 and now she's a full-fledged boy. It took many years and mom is still dealing with it. But I think about all the kids. I know 5 different children in my town alone who all want to be different sexes. And the parents are walking with the child. There has been no blockers or drugs, but they're letting them explore. Oh, I really want to be a boy, mommy. Okay. And some of these kids we've seen from a young age want to be a boy. Like they have those tendencies and you think, oh, maybe they will do that. And now that it's so talked about, we're thinking maybe, but you know what happens? It doesn't happen in the school. It happens between mom and kid. And maybe because this area is a little bit more socially accepting versus, Chicago, where I'm from, where people just like, what? You have to kind of treat those places to what they're giving you. And if I was in a very small town and I had a child who was behaving a certain way and they needed this attention and there was a teacher at school that leaned into this kid, I can see that being a hand and mouth being fed, where a parent's like, oh, it will never happen in my house. Okay, that situation is really different. But I know I'm in an area where everyone's like, it's no big deal. This is this, this is that. But I always feel the choice goes back to the parents. And how dare anyone step over that? And I feel everything that I hear day to day is just the destruction of families. And it makes my stomach curl because where's the dinner every night? Where's dad coming in and talking about his day and asking the kids, how was your day? How often do parents actually look at their kid and say, what was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? What could you have done different? People don't talk like that to each other anymore because we're stopping family dinners. What's funny about that is I've got 3 kids and one's going this way, one's going that way. And someone's like, oh, we don't have time to have dinner. Okay, I have dinner 3 times. I have dinner with this kid, then I have dinner with this kid, and I'm having dinner when it's time for them to eat. and I sit down and we talk about whatever's going on. Because if you lose that connection, you're going to lose your kid.
So it's that counter force that Mauro is speaking about, that recognition of the negative, and how do we counteract it? The best way, of course, is with positive, right? We know that. We all know that. We're adults. We've been through stuff. We're smart enough to understand. Kids, by definition, aren't. Hello, they don't have enough life experience. But therefore, it's incumbent upon us to channel that goodness and let it be seen. Just because you're sitting at a table, I can see it now, actually. Wonderful, Lori. Okay, dinner is at 6:30. I'm just making it up, right? Whoever wants to eat, come and eat. Oh, this one's going this way. All of a sudden, one starts coming to the table and talking to mom. The next one comes, they drift. Pretty soon, everybody drifts to the table because, wow, that's the place to be. I'd rather be at the table with my siblings, even though I can't stand them at the moment, and this one did that, than sitting in front of the rectangle. Because people are human. That human connection, as Diane has been saying all along, that ability to speak with your child and just to be there and to be normal. The best way to get rid of anything that's dysfunctional is to be functional, right? I think that's a good counterpunch. First of all, we've gone more than an hour, and it's wonderful. We have so much more to discuss, kids. We haven't even begun to discuss things that we'll be talking about on our next show. I will tell everybody, I'm announcing here and to our wonderful panel that, yes, we will be on social media. Yes, we will be on social media. Well, our Instagram will be up, I think, either later today or tomorrow, and LinkedIn and on YouTube and such. So we'll be able to share and really promote and all kinds of stuff, because we're beginning to be of benefit to the world. And as we began the show, there's a feeling almost of despair that's rippling around the country. I can hear it, I can feel it, I can smell it. And the alternative is hope. HOPE, helping others progress every day. We are that hope, because we're talking about marriage. There is no greater place to find hope, to hold on to the tree. What was that game you used to play where only entry, you hold on to the tree, and then you're at the safe place, and then you go out hide and seek, or whatever it is. The tree was always a place you can come to, and that's a good place to be, right? And that's who we are. And that's who you are. Each one of you, wonderful Diane and Maura and Lori, you bring such greatness. I get the comments that people love it. They love listening to you, even me sometimes, but it's really wonderful. So on that fabulous note, we do our blessing for everybody. We're going to do a group hug, and then our blessing is to go forth, live exuberantly, spread the seeds of joy, happiness, peace, and love. And now our group hug, which stands for, of course, heartfelt, unlimited giving. Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Make it a great one, everybody. Thank you. Best wishes. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joy of Living podcast. Now that's another step towards your healthier, happier, and wealthier life. Never hesitate to do good in the world, no matter what the situation. Join us for another upbeat discussion next time at barryshore.com. And be sure to leave a rating and subscribe to the show to get more conversations like this. And remember to share it with your family and friends too. See you on the next episode.